When you say life experience, I just think more dicks.
Of
Like she's fucking more guys. That's all I can.
To him, that's all there is to women.
Oh, this will be interesting. You wrote when you are a young girl. I assume you mean like when you're a woman.
And I was a young girl. Did I wrote that?
Okay, I'll finish the sentence. When you're a young girl, avoid dating men who are a lot older than you.
Okay.
So you're saying like,
yeah.
I'm assuming you're talking about like adult age gap relationships.
Fine, but after experiencing myself first and also hearing stories of other women, I do notice a consistent thing with men who are older. I think they sometimes date younger girls out of insecurity.
Oh,
that could be true. Depends on the person, I suppose. Maybe if she had a pattern of that happening in her life or people that she knows, but I don't think that's necessarily true.
The older men are insecure.
Yes.
How so?
Yes, because at first I also didn't agree with this statement. Like, it's just because they can't handle a woman their age and they have too much baggage and those kind of things. I think as adults you can work through these things, and I also think a grown man. What do you have in common with a very younger girl? And it's always about the man trying to control her, shape her in a way that he wants her to.
I don't know about this always thing. I just don't think I just don't think that is necessarily true. I don't know. Maybe she has had bad experiences, but I'm just not seeing a huge pattern like this.
Her to be mold her in a way that is easy for him to deal with. And I don't think it's as common as we think. Big age gap to relationships. It's probably a handful of relationships are like that. And yeah, I think there would be a dynamic that the men would be more controlling over the relationship. And usually it doesn't end up well, I think.
Okay, so there's a lot there. You said commonalities. You said that the man would be more. You think there's a tendency for older men to be more controlling when they're dating younger women?
Yes.
Okay, so how would that manifest itself? Like controlling how?
Making decisions for her, telling her what she can and cannot do. And because she is younger, she probably feels like below him and more unexperienced in life, and probably, I think it will end up making her not happy. She's not able to experience her life the way she should have.
Okay. When it comes to the control component, don't you think, weren't you making an advocation for men being leaders?
I do.
There's a difference between leadership and being controlling, obviously, right?
Certain
like, didn't you say men should be more like masculine, step up, etc.?
Exactly.
So couldn't you
not the same thing?
You have like a dynamic with a woman exactly your age or even older, where that level of, I don't know if you would categorize it as control, I would categorize it as leadership, that would exist in a same age.
If you categorize being controlling as leadership, that sounds like a you problem, Brian.
Relationship too?
Could you rephrase that in a different way?
Well, okay, you're saying that the man is more likely to be in, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying the man's more likely to be in control of a relationship where the woman is younger.
Yes.
But isn't that exactly the type of relationship dynamics that you're in favor of?
Not completely.
Okay. So what components of that would you object to?
I think from my experience, I have I worked for about a year. I stood in front of a class, and I had people from ages 19 until 25. I think I experienced hundreds and hundreds of people in 1 week. And usually girls around, maybe 19, 20. Usually, not all of them, of course, but they seem...
Why do you refer to them as girls?
Because
That's kind of common language.
They're young,
That's not that unusual.
19-year girls.
But it would not be incorrect to refer to them as women, right?
No,
Not correct.
they're women too.
Okay.
They menstruated, I guess.
Well, but you said 19 and 20. I mean, these are they're legally adult women.
Yes,
Right, okay.
but I think somebody even mentioned that at 25 your frontal lobe develops. I don't know. 19-year-old girl is different from a 28-year-old.
Are you trying to say that a 19-year-old girl is more naive?
Yes, absolutely.
Wouldn't you argue though that if you're going to bring in the brain development argument, wouldn't you say or argue that making these decisions, getting into these relationships, you know, sometimes it's all about responsibility. Like responsibility and wisdom doesn't equate to brain development. Wouldn't you argue? Like you don't change from being a simpleton, to put it like a simpleton at 24 to having your brain fully developed at 25 the next day. You know what I mean? You don't.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. Yeah, the years of experience develop. Yeah.
Couldn't you argue that somebody at 19 could go through something, could have, it's not common, but, you know, have around the same awareness and sense of responsibility and understanding as somebody at 25 with their fully
Absolutely, I
developed
agree.
brain?
I don't think it's just the majority of young girls that have this type of understanding of the world, how relationships work, how men are, and social dynamics. I don't think the majority of girls around 18, 19, 20 have a good sense of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Do you think that a majority of older men are just controlling in general?
No, I don't think so.
So then do you say that your statement is just a generalization of all older men in a relationship with a younger female?
Yeah, in general, I would think so. Yes.
Okay. So then you are saying that majority of older men are controlling in a relationship.
I think she was saying that they'd be controlling if they were dating somebody younger. That doesn't logically follow what the lady in the black is trying to say here, because she was saying specifically the older men that are dating younger women. So if they're dating somebody who she is categorizing as girls, which would be like 20 years old, as somebody who's 30, I think that was the example that they started with. In that case, those men, she claims, are like that, you know, controlling in relationships because they see that younger girl as somebody who's more naive and easier to control. That's her claim here. I personally don't necessarily agree with that. Sure, that could happen, but I don't generally have a problem with age gap relationships at all, really. I mean, sure, these things could happen, but I think they're probably not as common as she thinks they are. But that's not her claim, is that these men are older men like that are controlling. It's just these specific older men that want to be in these kind of more extreme age gap relationships, that those specific ones are more controlling.
When an older man is specifically looking for a 10 to 15-year-old
Yes, that's where she was going with that.
younger girl, there's more behind it than just love, I think. So in a sense, the same way a lot of men talk about women when they're older, they're like, they have too much baggage, they hit a certain age and they can't attract a good relationship anymore. The same is with men. At some point when they're past 28, they're not in a relationship yet, they're probably failing at something in life, I think, and they look for a younger girl they're able to control more and to have a type of relationship dynamic that he wouldn't be able to have with an older woman.
Do you think that's the case for all age gap relationships?
No.
Okay, so some. What percentage?
Good question as well. I don't know.
Okay, so the way she was talking, she made it seem like it was the majority of them. But now, if it seems like she's not really sure.
No? Do you think it's...
So I'm not even sure if it's just something that happens sometimes. Sure, I mean, I don't disagree, but there's not really a point of that conversation. A lot of things happen sometimes. I think we're trying to find things here that are patterns or majority or in general.
Then this
Do
is
you think the majority of men who want to date a younger woman, the reason for them wanting to do that is because of this control component that you were referencing?
it's a part of it, but it's also a part because, of course, youth is attractive, and also to older men still. But I find it, yeah, odd if an older man, let's say he's 40 and he's only looking to date 20-year-olds. There's something wrong with him, I think.
What? Oh, go ahead, Warren.
Leonardo DiCaprio, for example.
Yeah, there's something wrong with him too for doing that. Yeah,
Did
it
you-
shows him he cannot have a stable relationship with somebody too.
I think you touched on it where I think it's mostly aesthetic, more so than it could be a component in some cases of control, but I think it's always going to be an aspect of that fabric of reality that I keep referring to, that biologically, because youth indicator, reproduction. I have this whole theory we don't need to get into unless you're interested in it, about why we are attracted to beauty, certain facial features, and it's seeing traits that, oh, if I reproduce with this person, my offspring.
That's probably not wrong, but there is such a thing as age-appropriate relationships. So there's youthfulness, but then there's also, I feel like there are socially acceptable limits to that sort of thing. So if you go too extreme, there could be something wrong with that. And if you go too extreme consistently, and like she was saying, if you're a 40-year-old man and you're always seeking out specifically 20-year-olds, sorry, then there probably is something wrong with that. Like if you're just not even considering dating somebody who's age appropriate.
Spring will have the highest likelihood of having those traits, thus carrying on my genetic code. And that happens in a split second. And this is one way that is acted out.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Yes. But I also think that just when you think of it, a 40-year-old man and a 20-year-old woman, what would they have in common that much,
I could answer that.
relationship-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of questions on that. So, first, though, just clarifying question: what is a way in which I would have a commonality with a woman that's my age, that on the basis of the commonality alone would be enough to push me over the edge to wanting to date her?
I think certain values in the time that you guys
Oh,
grew up.
values. Well, I think, hold on. So when you're talking about commonality, are you talking about like shared like cultural like music or movies? Or are you talking about,
For example, that's probably not the most important part, but that's a part of it.
okay.
I'm not sure what the point here is supposed to be. Like, where is he going with this? Is this one of those, if you want to date somebody, it has to be physical attraction? Because I could see some people would be primarily attracted to somebody based on their personality and interests and things like that. I feel like personally, I can often be attracted to somewhat unconventionally attractive men that are a certain type of personality or a certain level of intelligence and things like that. Sure, it has to be a component of physical. There has to be a component of physical attraction, but not necessarily like generically attractive people who would be like on a magazine cover. Usually I don't find most of those men attractive. I don't know why, but yeah, I mean, sure, there has to be some component of physical attraction for a relationship like that, but I think things like that can grow. It's not something that you necessarily have to start with right away.
I guess my confusion though, aren't there people, is it logically possible that there's like a 60-year-old and a 20-year-old who have more in common than does a 60-year-old and another 60-year-old? Is it logically possible?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
There could be a possibility
Sure.
for that, but that's not the majority of the cases.
It could be the case, but you would agree that there are people your own age who you would be completely incompatible with as it relates to commonality.
Could you say
I mean, sure,
that again?
these things
Sorry, my
happen.
English.
Also, for example,
Sure, these things happen. Let's go back a bit.
then does a 60-year-old and another 60-year-old. Is it
That's
logically possible?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
There could be a possibility for that, but that's not the majority of the cases. Majority of
It could be the case, but you would agree that there are people your own age who you would be completely incompatible with as it relates to commonality.
Could you say that again? Sorry, my English.
Well, so for example, I'm 36.
Yeah.
There are 36-year-old women that I have nothing in common with.
Yeah.
Sure. So
But you bring that up though as an argument for like why I shouldn't date them, right? So
True.
or why men shouldn't date younger women because
but these would be edge cases.
there's a lack of commonality.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if like men or even women care that much about. I agree with you on having shared values, but I think values are much more easy to come by than like having like shared cultural touchstones, like, oh, you like the same band, you like the same movie. Also, if a girl really likes you, you can show her that shit and she'll start to like it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, but I mean, I think for both men and women, I don't think commonality is really high on the totem pole in terms of what people care about. Like, if you're a Christian, then yeah, you'd want to date another Christian, but and also what really, I guess I would ask, what do men and women have in common really?
A lot? What kind of question is that? What does anybody have in common with anybody? It depends on the person.
What do women and men have in
Like,
common?
what do we have in
What?
common?
Well,
My
I
cat is
think
confused as well.
biologically speaking, we both want to reproduce, have children, and
Okay.
want someone. We don't want to be alone. Like
Okay.
probably that's everybody here wants love and don't wants to be alone. So we have that all in common. So we're looking for a partner to close that gap
Mm-hmm.
for ourselves. So we have that at the base in common. And after that, of course, we want safety, food. We have these basic desires that are all the same, that are all in common. So we understand each other on that level.
Well, let me ask you this. What would I have in common with a 35-year-old that I can't have in common with a 25-year-old?
Like experience, life experience.
When you say life experience, I just think more dicks. Like she's more guys. That's all I can.
To him, that's all there is to women.
All I can. But what do you mean life experience? Like
I wanted to make a point because
Yeah. Go ahead.
I did this job that I was a teacher and I met like hundreds of 20-year-old girls, and I'm standing in front of the class, and majority, not all of them, but they're sitting on their phones, unmotivated, uninterested. When you have a conversation with them, they're staring at their screen and stuff. They're so like there's not much. There is not much going on inside their heads. So I'm sometimes thinking, and I'm saying,
I don't know if that's really fair. I feel like every generation has something similar to that to say about the next generation. But I do think that there is particular harm in just the amount of social media that children are using. It's never been quite that extreme before, the differences.
I'm saying that's not all of a 19-year-old woman, but what does a 40-year-old man with all this life experience, is he only going for her looks?
Yeah, probably.
Probably, yeah. And what is
Look.
I don't know if there's anything wrong with that in particular either. Some people are okay with dating based on primarily looks, and that's fine. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's trying to be controlling about it. It's just more focused on physical preferences.
a relationship based off of?
I mean,
What kind of relationship is that?
Well, I would say that perhaps there's some scenario where it's looks, and he's just thinking like, okay, she's 20 or whatever, and she has the most childbearing years ahead of her. That might be it. That might be all that he's thinking about.
Yeah, I would think that's kind of.
Personally, I think that's a little sad. I wouldn't want to be in that sort of relationship where you're basically just an object